Welcome in, everybody. We have today a very special mock draft episode joined by a couple of really amazing guests here. We have stage left, the Thomas Dimitroff, spent 12 years as the GM of the Atlanta Falcons, stepped in, brought in Matt Ryan, made one of the more memorable non-QB trades on draft day that I can remember, going to get Julio Jones, which was just a franchise-altering move there. And, helped build one of the best offenses of the decade that took down my beloved Green Bay Packers. Thanks, Thomas, in the NFC Championship. And then stage right, we have Eric Eager. Spent a long time helping build a lot of the stuff PFF has, gotten to this point. And now both of you are together with Sumer Sports. And I wanted to kind of give you guys the floor to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing over there, and you can take it from there.
Look, I'll start, and then we'll turn it over to the highly intelligent Eric Eager, as you know. I mean, anytime you talk to Eric, you learn something, right? Look, this was an interesting situation. About a year plus ago, I get a call from Paul Tudor Jones, world famous macro trader, right? Unbelievable, successful businessman, of course. Big fan of football, big fan of fantasy football. He and his son were looking for a domain expert to jump on board with them to join this potential business that they were putting together. And it was basically a roster optimization tool that they were trying to create. And we were looking to come together and basically bring together some highly intelligent data scientists and engineers and provide a roster optimization tool that would supplement general managers with their approach and their ability to put together their teams and pull together their teams, right? I would say to you right now, everyone, you'd put 32 general managers in this room right now, and everyone would raise their hand and say, look, I know I'm making a ton of money from my owner. I know everyone in my fan base believes in me, but everyone would say it's not an exact science. And everyone would say if they had their druthers, they would have a tool to help augment their ability. Everyone believes that they'd go toe-to-toe with anyone in the league, right? Because that's what they believe, but they also believe they need help. And there's a lot of data out there, quite honestly, that could help them in the process, but they're not tapping into the data. And I say often, I'll toss it over to Eric now, criminally underutilized data at the fingertips of every one of these general managers. We believe at Sumer Sports, we're creating this cutting edge algorithmic approach that we think can help every one of these general managers optimize their roster building abilities. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eric Eager, one of the highly intelligent guys in the world in football analytics. And Eric, why don't you take it and run with it?
You're always too kind.
I do want to attest, if I can attest to that. I used to, back when I was getting this channel up off the ground, I was a daily listener of the forecast with you and George. So you definitely inspired early in my process, just kind of helping me reshape the way I look at the game, trying to factor in a lot of the numbers, and I do appreciate you for that. So,
well, Marcus, that's very kind of you, and obviously, it's a testament to your how big your audience is, and how much you've offered to this space as well, and it's very kind of you, Thomas, to say that, of course, and we've been working together for a while. I think it's instructive to kind of look at where, like, how we are composed at Sumer, because I look at, I've been a huge fan of football for my whole life. I'm just a complete junkie, and I've read all the books I've done, and when I was PFFer, we did a lot of consulting with the Falcons. You could see, even though they had so much success, you think about the 2008 draft, the 2015 and 16 drafts, and all of that, and yet I always thought Thomas had one of the more humble kind of demeanors about him, really had an analytics person's mind, even though the background was in scouting. So when it came time to join up with Sumer Sports, like, it was an opportunity I really jumped at. I think that Thomas is right. I mean, we're building, like, our draft tool right now for NFL teams has something like 50 submodels in it, right? And that takes a huge undertaking. When I was at PFF, all 50 of those models were on my laptop. I feel so blessed now that we have so many other data scientists that can come in and do a lot of those things, frankly, better than I can. And so, we're right now in a position where we're trying to deliver for our two pilot clubs. We're also trying to grow our audience, because we know that the audience for football is only going to grow, and it's only going to want to get more intelligent, right? As evidenced by your channel, Marcus. Like, so we have our podcast, the Sumer Sports Show, with myself and Thomas. And I think that that to me is a very unique show where you get a former GM talking to an analytics person. And we're going to have our live draft stream, of course, on Thursday night of the draft, which starts at 7:30, where Thomas and I are going to go through all the picks and interlude some of Thomas's great experiences, as you said, with the Julio Jones trade, the one that the great Bill Belichick famously said wasn't a very good idea, and so on and so forth. So I'm really excited for what the future is at Sumer, and it's a pleasure to join you guys today.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Bill, the wide receiver position, I think maybe could use a couple analytical models on that end in New England. But that's awesome, guys. Everybody, make sure you check out, hop in for the live stream. I'm sure the perspective that you two guys are going to bring is going to be really unique. But it is, as you guys know, mock draft season, and that is ultimately what we are here for. Should be a really fun one, man. We're gonna go back and forth. We're gonna do this a little bit from like what we would do perspective, and with 31 picks this year, we decided kind of off camera to do like a little just discussion and actually vote on the first pick, and then we'll break down so we all get 10 picks each. So I will pass it off to you guys to start. I guess number one question is it for you down to just one guy? Is it between Bryce and Stroud, or does even Anthony Richardson get into the mix if it's you picking here? What do you guys view with this number one pick?
Yeah, we did.
Let me just. I was going to say, Eric, and then I'll toss it to you. I'm just saying, from a guy who's picked a quarterback, maybe not number one overall, but picking a quarterback is a huge deal. And I've said this time and again. As a general manager, man, you are 100% evaluated on your ability to snap a quarterback off the board and do it properly, and not only keep them on your team, sign them to numerous contracts. That's a big deal. So my point is Scott Fitterer. I love Scott. I think Scott is really good at what he does, and Scott has a ton of pressure on him going into this with his new head coach to try to pick the right person. So I would just say it does come down to two for me, quite honestly, and between – are we going to talk about this right now? Do you want me to give my idea, or do you want to talk about the two that I think it is, or how do you actually want to approach this, Marcus?
Well,
let's hear. What were you going to say, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the real issue is, I think Anthony Richardson obviously has a high ceiling, but when you trade like $200 million of assets to move from 9 to 1, you scaffold the roster with the DJ Charks and the defensive players and the Adam Thielens. Like, you're trying to win this year, right? And you look at the NFC South, where the best quarterback in the division is Derek Carr, like a guy who's only played one playoff game his whole career. Like, I don't know. It's weird, and Thomas disagrees with me because I don't think he thinks Anthony Richardson is the pick ever. I think if you're an AFC team in this slot, you give Richardson some consideration, because only the really toolsy guys are going to ever win in that conference. If you're the Panthers and Stroud or Young becomes a top 12 quarterback in year one, you have a stranglehold on that division. So I think that for me is why it boils down to just these two guys. And I think it's close. There are positives and negatives to both guys.
Can I say, however, Eric, that our owner at Carolina, I'm saying, when you talk about David Tepper, he is a competitive, driven, let's get this done. He's not looking for a top 12 quarterback. I know this, and when Arthur Blank was breathing down my neck with Matt Ryan, it is now, and they have such pressure on them right now to make this the right move. And that's why when we start talking about Richardson, as much as the upside is there and the athleticism and the backflips and all the great stuff that we look at, I'm not meaning to be that facetious, but the fact that I'm looking for someone who's going to come in and is going to be as established as possible. I'm looking for growth now. I'm looking for the ability to hit the ground running, and that's important for me from where I am. And I'll just put it out there. I'm a CJ Stroud guy. I think with his polish and his moxie, I think he'll continue to grow with this team, and I think it's the right move for this team.
So I'm curious your perspective when it comes to Bryce's size. How do you think that conversation kind of goes in your war room? And also with a player like Stroud, who was surrounded with such an incredible surrounding situation, how much weight do you put into, okay, but he's not going to have this protection. He's not going to have all these guys running wide open. What is he going to look like in a different situation?
Well, do you want to talk about Bryce first, as far as the size? Is that
Sure.
your? Yeah, just
Yeah.
on with regard to Bryce. Look, when we picked Matt way back then. God, it seems like forever ago. I get it, back in '08. I was all about thinking I want prototypical, stand tall in the pocket. I want to build around that initially, and then if we ever moved in a different direction, and towards the end, I started thinking about that a little bit. How would it be to have this really athletic, moving quarterback, having had Matt for as long as we did? I mean, there is no question that the size is a concern, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. He is a very, very good quarterback, and he's going to. I think he's going to do well in this league. Of course, you got to plan around him. You have to have the right people around him. You have to right supporting group. You know that he's going to be facing some big, tall people. Of course, that's a given. It's a concern. Don't let anyone say anything but that. I believe it is. So, the fact that you come back to talking about C.J. Stroud and the idea that he's got protection, he's got all that he has around him. Had all he had around him at Ohio State. Hopefully they're building around him there, and hopefully they can be smart about having a former quarterback, be the head coach is a really important thing, I believe, in Carolina for a guy like C.J. Stroud or any quarterback they have in there to continue to grow with and continue to nurture a player like that. And that's where I just come back thinking that he is more of the ideal quarterback for that position.
So Marcus,
Number
we
one.
have
Okay.
we
So,
have Thomas saying Stroud. I'm going to conceal my
yep.
opinion. What do you think about these two guys? I mean, other than because Richardson, we're going to end up in a Cats game possibly if you say Richardson, right? So what if we
I'm not going to say Richardson.
you say Richardson?
I'm not going to say Richardson.
Okay,
No.
okay. So between these two guys, right? It's like I feel like I had all these doubts about Stroud. You watch him against Notre Dame. You watch, early in the season. You obviously the Michigan games are both disappointing, even though I don't think he was the reason they lost. And yet you get the Georgia game, and you're like, oh my God, this is a real ball player. And you go back and
Hmm.
look, and like there were real NFL movements there, like the whole game, right? And so like all the issues associated with him kind of not necessarily wash away in my mind, but they abate a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I think one thing I was actually noticing as the year went on, kind of leading up to that Michigan game, is that I didn't love his feel in the pocket, but when he did see pressure, he could get out of it. And I think in that Georgia game, he absolutely saw it because there was a lot more than we had seen throughout the year. So he definitely has the reaction time, the ability to sense that pressure, and definitely the physical ability to get out of it. What I'm worried about is the other side of pocket presence, where it's like, not does he know when he's pressured, does he know when he isn't pressured? Is he going to hang in there? Is he going to bail out of clean pockets? Is he going to navigate to the clean space in the pocket, which to me is like night and day between him and Bryce Young. And that is a trait that I value quite a lot as I'm watching quarterbacks. So that was a big defining difference between them. I do like Stroud, but Bryce is my guy. I think the height and really just the frame is definitely going to be a concern as far as durability is concerned, but I didn't feel like it impacted his game that much. I felt like he actually was the most comfortable targeting the middle of the field out of anybody in this top four. So I think that's really encouraging, as opposed to, you look at, I think that's impacted guys like Kyler Murray and even Russell Wilson at times, the height maybe being an issue in that part of the field. I didn't feel that way with Bryce Young. So my vote's going to be Bryce. Did you give your pick, Eric?
I haven't. That's why I was going to wait till the end. I'm very close here. I do lean a little bit towards Stroud just because I think that the sturdiness, the Georgia game I've watched a number of times. I'm just thinking to myself like, where did he err in that game? And you're looking at like the Georgia defense being, one of the better defenses that we've seen in all of in college football, a recent record. And in some ways, like his supporting cast got a little bit worse at wide receiver as time went on in Ohio State, and you still were able to see him put together games like that. A lot of guys in college football, you think of like Herbert, you think about Levis, you think about guys like that, where Brock Purdy even they peak a little early in their career, and then they kind of falls off a little bit. Stroud, I didn't see that as much, and so I a lot of stuff about Bryce Young is great, especially the sack to pressure stuff and like his ability to work into pressure and stuff. I'm picking two, so I'm going to take Young there, but like I think that I think Stroud is the first pick if we have to vote.
Can I ask you guys one quick question? Put you guys
Sure.
on the spot as GMs. Okay, your pressure is on you because of what it is with Scott Fitterer and what they need to do with this with a really strong owner. And there's one question mark, and it's height. And you make this pick, right? You make this pick. If it works out, great, everything's great. If it doesn't, are you willing to take the heat a year in where people are like, well, we told you, the world told you, how could you not see that? It's ridiculous, I know, but those kind of things happen. Having been in that world, Eric, you and I were talking about stuff thrown our way in different worlds. I mean, everyone has an opinion about it, right? Ultimately, you can't think about the outside, but when you're putting it together, you have to think about everyone within your organization and everyone being behind your pick as well. It ultimately comes down to the GM and the head coach to make the choice with the sign off by the owner, of course. But look, it's not an easy pick here, and I love both of them, honestly, Marcus. I get where you're coming from Bryce, but I'm still kind of that guy that likes to have that a little bit taller guy. I don't know how much taller though. Maybe
Thomas,
maybe
Thomas,
I'm over.
how many errors do you think are, or maybe they're not errors? How many errors would you say are made by people because they don't want the other guy to, like, they're worried about the other side? Because ultimately, once you pick one of these guys, how the other guy does is irrelevant to you, right? It's you make the choice and it happens. Or you think about like, oh, I don't want to cut this player because if he goes to my division rival and does really well, I'm going to look like an idiot. And obviously, I feel like that comes into the brain, right? As you're thinking, like the opportunity cost of taking player A is seeing player B and the likelihood that he could go somewhere else and blow up and make you look bad. That's the Baker Mayfield always has Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, right? And like there's all that kind of going with it. How much does that creep in as a factor for you?
Oh, it creeps in, Eric. There's no question about it. There are so many layers to it that you try to put out of your mind, of course, especially in those top 5, 10 picks or whatever. It is tough. And remember, Eric and Marcus, every time he throws a ball and it gets knocked down because he just gets knocked down. I mean, Matt Ryan got knocked down quite a bit. It used to drive me nuts. I'm like, this guy's 6'6", almost 6'5", whatever he was. And it used to drive me bonkers when the balls got knocked down. You can only imagine that just happens in it, and it's one of those things. It's one part of it all. I get it, but man, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I would be very interested to see. They went up there for a reason, right, gentlemen? You know that they're not still
Mhm.
trying to figure this out.
No,
They
the
know who they're going.
markets,
At least that's
the betting markets believe that it's Young, right? He's about minus 310 if you look at FanDuel and stuff. Like, I obviously if we were trying to be predictive here, we would pick Bryce Young. Marcus, you said that we're trying to pick what we would do, and so we're just trying to pick the best guy. It actually makes the subsequent picks easier, frankly, because of a
It really
predictive
does.
mock. A predictive mock that goes with Bryce Young first is actually really hard because we don't know what Houston's going to do at two. If what is reported to be their favorite player is off the board, but in this mock, it's actually easier.
Yeah, I know. I'm going on a show after this, and they've got a what's like a surprise pick, and I'm like, well, if Bryce goes one, Houston, all bets are off. We don't know what's going to happen there. So, with that said, should we advance to the number 2 pick here?
Yeah, let's lock in Bryce here.
All right.
Sorry,
All right,
Stroud.
and are you guys able to kind of follow along? I guess I didn't get
do I.
a.
Yeah, do I have to do something? I'm not sure exactly what I have to do, gents.
Can you keep track in your
I'll
head at
keep.
all, or
Yeah, I can.
okay?
I think.
Okay.
I'm just gonna pull up the old PFF mock
I
draft.
have that as well. I have the
simulator
PFF
real
mock
quick.
simulator in there.
Oh,
Not
is that
to.
what I should do? I can do that.
I'm just gonna fill it in as we go here.
Okay. And then that way,
Let's-
hopefully none of us will repeat a pick or something. But I'm at 2, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm
How about
gonna
you?
go Bryce Young at 2. That's how much I meant it, guys, when I said that I thought that it was close. I'm gonna go Bryce Young at
Yeah.
2 to Houston. Houston drafts their first quarterback since Deshaun Watson in 2017.
Cool.
Well,
Yeah, and I think
besides
we've
Davis Mills, their first round quarterback.
it was their first pick of that draft, though. I
That's
believe
right. I forgot. Yeah, that's true.
Davis Mills was.
And Eric, who did you just say? I'm sorry,
Bryce
I was
Young.
just catching up.
Bryce Young
Yes.
second.
Okay, got it. I'm trying to keep track here. I was told that I had number 2, but obviously I don't have number 2. Do I have number?
Did Thomas have 2? Am I?
Oh, he swiped in. He stole it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Thomas. You go ahead and pick 2. I must have. Look at me not being able to read an email as a math guy.
Well, I'm still like taken back to. So who did we end up taking at 1, gentlemen?
Stroud.
We didn't.
Stroud.
Oh, I thought. Oh,
You guys both
deferred
voted
us.
Stroud.
Marcus, I'm sorry, you deferred to us. I got it. Okay, so my
I was
number 2.
outnumbered.
Yeah, my number 2 would be Bryce Young. So
Great.
how about that, Eric? Making it easy.
What I don't want to do, and Marcus talked about the PFF forecast, myself and George always agreed with each other, and I always made fun of. I said it was because George never prepped for the show, and so he would always say what I said. But I got to make sure I got to not agree with Thomas on everything he says here. But so far we're 2 for 2. Okay, I am Arizona here at 3, right, Marcus?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't really. I think they trade this pick.
Can I actually, before you go, can I ask Thomas a quick question about this pick
Sure.
here?
Yes.
Just from your perspective. So they got a new GM, just took over, Terry Fontenot. Not sure if I'm getting the pronunciation right there, but he just took over. So if you're sitting here at 3, I mean, we just saw in Atlanta, they kind of stayed put, first year in, just kind of best player available. Don't get too crazy. Don't mess up the pick. Is that a huge, you want to nail the first pick, or are you all in on like, nope, we're going to do this process oriented and do it my way?
And you mentioned Terry Fontenot. Were you?
Did you mean Monty?
Monte Ossenforth?
Oh yeah, that is my fault. Yes, I'm
No,
getting my Titans scouts mixed up here.
Yeah, well, I get that. I mean, believe me, I go round and round on it. But we're referring to Monte Ossenforth, right? First time GM there, correct? And and I'm sorry, your question was what?
My question is, are you willing to trade down here, or are you looking at a guy like Will Anderson? Like, nope, let's just get our blue chip guy, lock it in, and we'll build from there. Or are you like, nope, we've got a process, we need picks, we need darts to throw, and we're going to do it my way.
So if it were to be another organization, but for the Cardinals, I might think, let's stay here, let's get our guy, right? Because I've been known for being the person that was always trading up. I was Trader Thomas. Not that I really liked that nickname, but it was where I was. I didn't go back that often because I didn't have the opportunities to go back as much. They are in a spot there that they truly could trade back and obviously gain more booty. And I think it would be really good for that organization, given where they are, right? Given an organization that is pretty darn particular about the finances. This group needs 100% to come out the gate with a stud in this position. Of course, if they're trading back within the top 10, they're going to land someone for sure. I would think about trading back where they are, given all things considered, even though they have the opportunity to take someone that could be a groundbreaking individual here. I would trade back because I think there's plenty there in the next 5, 8, or 7, whatever it may be.
Okay, so Thomas has given me the levity or the he's given me the I can do this. So I do own, looking at the email properly, I own 6 and 18, which are 2 picks of the Detroit Lions. I am going to trade.
Oh, I like where you're going.
I'm going to trade 3 to Arizona. Sorry, Arizona's going to trade me 3 for 6 and 18. The 2 first rounders. I know I could get the change correct or whatever, but we're only doing 1 round. So say 3 and change equals 6 and 18 and change. I'm going to do that trade. Yep. So now I'm Detroit. And I am going to take Anthony Richardson, quarterback, Florida, with the third pick.
You just brought on a wave of my viewers because I've been doing this since January, and I don't mean to cut off your analysis of the decision there, but I just want to warn you that we've got a huge split on this channel. About 50% of the fans love this, and 50% can't stand it because they believe in Jared Goff.
Thomas knows this because we started our show in October this year, but I was a big time Restore the Roar. The Lions are a team of destiny, all this stuff. I really like Jared Goff. I like his character. But there's limitations there. As somebody who's rooted for Kansas City my whole, my adult life, there was a time when I really liked what Alex Smith did for the Chiefs too. But at some point it was time to move on. And what I like here is that the roster is good enough where if this pick fails, it's not going to completely tank their straights because they have they got a good offensive line, good defensive line. They're building the secondary, I think, properly. They got great receivers. And so I think that this is the best situation for him. And if you're Detroit and you hit on this pick, you're the best team in the NFC. If you don't hit on it, it's not great, but you can regroup, I think, a little bit better than to Thomas's point about the Panthers. If you trade $200 million in assets and you doink that pick, you're all working somewhere else in a little bit. Whereas I think Detroit can I think Detroit's the perfect situation to take this swing.
Eric,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Marcus. It's a good thought. It's a good thought. By the way, scouting 101, Eric, is never throw out superlatives like great. You just said they had a great receiving group. Is that right? Do you believe they are top notch and top of the world?
Amon-Ra St. Brown is sorry. Okay. let me straighten up here and do this properly. Amon-Ra St. Brown is on a 9 scale to me like a 7, right? Not even going to throw that. Okay. Jamison Williams on a 9 scale. With a year, we saw him play, he didn't get hurt in the second half of the season, a 6 range, right? Beyond that, I believe they retained Josh Reynolds. Khalif Raymond has been a solid guy. To get Marvin Jones back, who was there before, good contested ball guy. It's not the top end because you look at last year when St. Brown didn't play, it was like they lost, they got shut out by the Patriots. They didn't score a touchdown against the Dallas Cowboys. When St. Brown played, he was one of the most effective players in the whole league. And then you add to that a top 12 pick in Williams, a veteran like Jones, another veteran like Raymond, who actually, is very good contributor for them. I think I do think that receiving core is one of the better ones in football.
And the reason I say that is because when growing up through the ranks, it was always held over our head. You just said great, and these guys are okay for as long as you're at that organization. When you made a categorical statement like that, you just would never live it down. Believe me, when you're making your way through the Bill Belichick paradigm and you make categorical comments like that, you better be ready to stick by it. I made one time about Lawyer Malloy, and I never lived it down. It was when Lawyer Malloy was on his way out. So the Bill Belichick, it's like ingrained in my mind. So I'm like, all right, I'm good if you think that's really what he is. I personally think you might think they're good, really good, solid group. And
now I know.
But to your point, very quickly, you got a quarterback there that you can grow with. If it doesn't work out, I get your point. Brad Holmes, this is a big move for him, though, right? Making a move like that back to, a fairly novice, younger general manager. These are big moves.
Yeah. You probably strutted around the building a little bit when the Bills beat you at 31-0 with Lawyer in week 1 of that year, though.
Probably. I didn't do it with him looking at me. Believe me. Believe me.
Oh man. So the Colts are up at 4, and we're gonna get these quarterbacks off the board. I'm gonna take Will Levis. I'm actually kind of pro Will Levis. I think a lot of the hate has gone pretty far on him. I get it. I don't love his ability to sense pressure. I think there's accuracy stuff to work on there. But when you talk about a guy that he's going to get to the NFL and his job is arguably going to be easier based on how much fire he was under and how little support he had at Kentucky, I felt like he got through his progressions. They could disguise coverages against him, and he would find that rotating safety, know where to go with the ball. So I'm a Will Levis believer, and I think the Colts are getting a good one here at number 4.
So if I could comment on it, back to Chris
Mm-hmm.
Ballard, this is like a broken record here. The pressure on Chris Ballard is unbelievably high now, right? And Eric and I have talked about this ad nauseum. He is a really good football man. He knows his stuff. Yet he's in a spot right now where they've been struggling on this quarterback choice over the last few years, right? Whether they're veterans or not. My old guy going there, that ended up not working out, obviously. So all eyes, owner's eyes, as well as everyone else, is on this group to make a decision on this. Levis, all the good stuff that he has, looks good, rocked up, all that stuff. Looks like you, Eric. I saw you with your shirt, shirt sleeves, like you're all rocked up. That's him. The side that I'm not that I'm concerned about, Marcus, is truly, is this the guy that you're going into the future with? Can he really make all of those throws in his decision making? If there's precariousness about that side of it, it's not the strong arm. It's not. That's a big deal. If I'm going in thinking, "Oh my God, please take a deep breath and come in. Let's school this guy. Let's get Shane in there working with him. Let's figure it out." That's an uncomfortable spot to be in at 4 overall, knowing that your livelihood is definitely relying on this pick. I'm saying Chris's is. There's a lot on Chris right now on this pick. So I hope that there's
Does
not
he
too
have?
much. Yep.
Does he have any other options at this point, though? Would be my question. Is this kind of his like last dart throw? I mean, it is a hot seat. I believe in him. I think he could be successful elsewhere if things didn't work out. But outside of maybe going to make a move for Lamar, and
Well, that's what I was going to say.
The second
Lamar
great franchise move from Baltimore to Indianapolis. But
I know.
Outside of that, I don't know what other options he has.
Hendon Hooker? No.
No.
I mean, no. I think
I'm
that
saying later.
Yeah. Steichen had some success with Justin Herbert, another quarterback who kind of was good for a while at Oregon, kind of declined a little bit later in his career. Levis is similar. Both Herbert and Levis had high pressure to sack ratios. So that might be the way to look. But yeah, you're certainly getting the 4th best guy here. But it's it may if you're Ballard, I don't know if you can kind of play it down the middle anymore and expect to keep your job for that much longer. It's just the way it works, right? So I think that he's a very smart football man who's had a lot of bad luck, and I think that this way, if you get the good luck with Levis, I think that you keep we're talking about this period of the Colts tenure as more of like just a trough in an otherwise good career for Ballard. I think.
I like it, Marcus. I think it's the way to go. To your point, where else do you go with it?
Okay. So you are up, Thomas.
I am up. Seattle Seahawks. My buddy John Schneider, who spent some really good time with him, another really good football man, as you know. I'm just looking up at my board here. I'm going with a guy. I think D-line is where I'm going there. I'm going with a guy that probably people have fought because of the whole Jalen Carter idea. That's who I'm going with. I think they're the type of organization that can deal with some of the wayward element. And I'm not saying he's a wayward soul. I know there's a lot there that you're trying to get into, but I think that's a good organization to be with. We know the head coach there. I mean, Pete Carroll is all about upbeat, bringing people along, helping them along, kind of like your buddy, Eric, Coach Reed. They take these guys on like this. They work with them. They're behind them. These guys all of a sudden believe in their new head coach, and they're like, man, this cat's behind me. I'm going to do everything I can to run through the wall. I like this guy in that spot.
Yeah, I think that's good thinking.
Yeah,
Eric,
Frank Clark went through Seattle and then Kansas City. To your point about those two guys, a similarly troubled guy coming out of Michigan, which gives me, by the way, Will Anderson would have been the pick at 3, right? For all of you, people that are thinking about how to play the draft, a trade back at 3, quarterbacks get pushed to the front of the line, and I still get the guy I wanted here, Will Anderson, 6 to the Cardinals after trading back from Detroit. So that's where I'm going here. Anderson, it's cool that, one of the Patriot guys, Ossenfort, is there because I compare him a little bit to Josh Uche. Kind of a rich man's version of him, Kyle Van Noy, way back to Thomas's time, Adalius Thomas, guys like that who can play off the ball, cover, rush, do everything. I think that's Will Anderson. Adalius Thomas a bit bigger, but similar kind of play style.
And you're popping champagne when Seattle takes Jalen Carter, because I'm not sure they're necessarily in a situation that could be conducive for Carter's success. But Anderson is, like I was saying at 3, like I'm considering just staying put and just taking Will Anderson because he's such a home run there. So that'd be a great landing spot there. So the Raiders at 7. This does get a little bit tough with them because, looking at a guy like Tyree Wilson could be a really nice combination with Max Crosby for years to come. Got Chandler Jones there, kind of on the last legs of his career. But I think, for me, I've got 3 true like blue chip players in this class, and I have the utmost standard for when I say that. So Will Anderson, Devon Witherspoon, and Bijan, even though he's a running back. But I'm going to take Devon Witherspoon here, pair him with former Illinois DB Nate Hobbs, and we'll hope to have a competitive defense this year and kind of kick the quarterback can into next year.
I don't mind that at all. I think edge for the Raiders is a sneaky one, as you said, because you're always kind of with the premium positions like that. You always want to draft ahead of need, right? So you have Jones and Crosby there, so you draft ahead of need. But corner, you can never have enough corners, and this is a solid pick here.
And just so
Thomas.
Yes, I'm sorry, you guys cut out on my system for 1 second. Who was the pick?
Devon Witherspoon.
Devon Witherspoon.
It was Devon Witherspoon. Okay, very good.
Illinois.
Yeah, very good. So we're at 8 now, right?
Yeah, it's
so I'm clear.
Thomas. Yes. You get to go back to the chair for just a little bit.
How appropriate that you guys put me there. Look, I love the idea of what they're doing in Atlanta as far as trying to work on this defense, because that was a tough defense. I know they brought in their guy from Detroit. By the way, you haven't commented on him really yet, Eric, before we get to this pick. Do you think that was a good free agency move there for a 5th rounder?
Well, the Lions, I think, ate all of Okudah's money, which for top 3 players, it's not trivial. So, bang up job by the Falcons, right? I mean, now you have Bates, your guy, your last draft pick in round 1, AJ Terrell, a great corner, and now Okudah. Like that's the start of something right there.
It's a start. This is tough for me, and people will probably boo me on this, but I'm a big Christian Gonzalez fan. I think taking another corner there and really getting their 3 corners set, in my mind, I think is a really strong move. I understand there's going to be a lot of discussion about there because they're going to throw darts, and here's where my humble side comes in, or my vulnerable side, Marcus. I mean, Dan and I didn't leave the cupboard full there with unfortunately 2 guys that we drafted, with Vic Beasley as well as our other guy there, and we won't even get into his name right now. But those are, so they need their pass rush being ramped up. I get that, but it's just tough for me to walk away from a big corner like that to pair with AJ Terrell. So I'm strong on that move. I'd love your all's opinion on it.
I figured I would have an opportunity to ask you this question. They're bringing in that Saints staff. They're going to want to run a lot of bump and run, man coverage stuff. When do those conversations happen between the coaching staff with what they want to do and what the scouts are seeing? Gonzalez very well might be a great press man corner, but maybe you think Joey Porter is a better press man guy, but Gonzalez is a better overall player. When do those conversations kind of happen in the process?
Well, they usually happen through the spring when we're out working out, guys, following up with not only the combine workout, Marcus, but going out to work these guys out individually. When we picked AJ Terrell, that was a big discussion, right? We had such a divide in our building. I mean, Raheem Morris, who I really think is a good football coach, he was on the opposite, not the opposite end of the spectrum, but there was a lot of discussion there between he and I, whether this was a guy or whether it was our guy at Florida who Jacksonville took. That was, thank God we didn't take him, of course, right? But AJ was the right guy for us at the right moment. all of those discussions continue all the way through up to draft time.
Hmm.
Luckily, you have a guy, owners will ultimately, it's the GM's decision, along with the head coach, of course, depending on who has final 53 and final say. But those discussions happen all throughout the spring when you're trying to put it together. And if you are looking to change, your systems as Atlanta is, right, with a new D coordinator, you really have to be quite open as a general manager with your scouting staff who has been looking at these players all the way through the season without this D coordinator. Now you have a new D coordinator. He's going to be switching things up. It's incumbent and it's definitely up to the personnel department to have an open mind and be agile about it and have an open mind to say, okay, this is not the best person for this job. Let's listen to this D coordinator. Believe me, I'll tell you this. Every one of the scouts out there believe, because they've been looking at players for 14 months. A lot of times, God bless them, and I love coaches, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times those guys don't really get into evaluating the players for 2 weeks.
Right.
That's the interesting difference here, and we can go on and on about this discussion, but it is a big thing, right? Where you get that battle within the buildings between personnel men and coaches. That's when it can get quite heated. So in the end, you hope that you have a really good sort of synced relationship between your HC and your GM. If you don't, man, that can be a bear. And back in the day, there used to be a lot more of that loggerhead issue between GMs and head coaches. I feel like there's a pretty good understanding of that now that you have to work in sync. So that's my
I find that so fascinating, and I think when you talk about like certain teams being good established cultures, that's probably a lot of what you're talking about there is the cohesion and the existing relationships kind of helping make those decisions and relationships easier. So that's pretty cool. Next up,
I'm at 9.
Bears
This is
for you,
the
Eric.
most straightforward pick of the whole draft. It's Peter Skoronski from Northwestern to Chicago. Like, Bears need tackles. I think they have some developmental guys they're happy with. They got a premium position player in DJ Moore with the first pick. They have Fields. Defense, there's really, you could go Tyree Wilson here. I think it's interesting that he's falling. They're okay at wide receiver, and defensively, I don't think there's a guy now that Thomas took Christian Gonzalez that kind of in that secondary that you really want here. So to me, this is the most straightforward pick. I know he's got short arms, but I think like a pretty solid player. Here from Northwestern, a kid stays home in that Chicago area.
Yeah, you don't even have to leave Northwestern to see the last time a short arm tackle made it work just fine in Slater in LA. So I like that pick a lot.
Marcus, what are you putting on the card though? Remember, we have to put tackle or guard on the tag when we send it in.
I'm going to fail him at tackle. I'll put him at tackle, and if he can't make it work, we'll put him at guard. I think it'd be just fine at right tackle for them for sure.
Yeah. The last thing on short arms, it's an issue. All the people out there that mock or scoff at that, it's an issue. If your guy that has short arms doesn't have fast, adept hands and vision of it all, man, it can be a bear for sure.
Yeah,
I'm glad you said that.
They have so many holes on offensive line that he'll fit into one of them.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. I'm going to keep the offensive line run going, and I'm going to stay consistent with kind of how they draft up there in Philly. I'm going to take one of my guys in this draft, Paris Johnson. I am a huge fan of Paris Johnson. I was pounding the table for Andrew Thomas as the number one tackle in that draft with all those great tackles. Paris reminds me so much of him coming out, where he's got that just fluid athleticism out as a run blocker, a couple deficiencies with his feet that can be cleaned up in pass protection. In Philadelphia, it's a little bit interesting because they obviously have two tackles now, but they want to keep that pipeline going just as they always have. They don't want to find out what it's like to not have an O-line there. The last time that happened, they kind of broke Carson Wentz. So he'll probably start at right guard. Some teams have had success doing this. Start a guy at guard, and then if and when Lane Johnson decides to hang it up, you plug him back in at right tackle.
Yeah, Johnson's uncuttable until 2026. That Jordan Mailata's probably. So you're basically saying we're just going to throw numbers at the position and at offensive line because Mailata basically is uncuttable until 25. So it is like a numbers play at the offensive line, which look, this is a team. I'd rather the Eagles take a lineman on offense because they have an embarrassment of riches roster wise than them take a running back here. That's my orientation, but it'll be a while before he plays tackle unless somebody gets hurt.
Yeah, I get the uncuttable thing, but I'm not sure if Lane Johnson's going to be able to hold up physically and play that long.
He might retire.
So you get a little insurance there. And Paris just said in an interview that he's totally cool playing guard for as long as he needs to. So I think that O-line would be incredible with him at guard.
He is until his agent has to get him more money, right, Marcus? And he's like, get me out of this guard.
That's right.
Yeah. I like it. I like Paris. You kind of, can we lead into the next one then? Because I was thinking O-line or I was thinking receiver for Tennessee at 11.
Ran Carthon, by the way, Thomas, one of your former scouts.
Ran Carthon for sure. Very good football mind, very good eye, understands it, played at Florida, right? I was thinking all along, gosh, where would he be? Where does he factor in on the Florida thing? But it's beyond, right? Because we've already taken the quarterback. But I think the idea of being there with Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think they have to pull themselves out of this receiver situation. And that's not me jumping on the bandwagon, throwing a dart at John Robinson. Because, I'm still appalled that John Robinson got fired, by the way, Marcus. I just am blown away that at 7-5 that he – maybe there's other stuff that we don't know about. But, I know they definitely
I was
need a
stunned
receiver.
as well.
Yeah, I just think – So anyway, I just think having a receiver there, that's where I go. And believe me, I do want to say to everyone, this seems still very rich to me for Njigba. Like I like him. But he's not one of those guys that's just the smoker that's just doing all these crazy things. He's a very good, consistent football player. Usually at, the 10 to 15, I'm thinking something a lot more impactful and eye-catching. I'm thinking normally I would think someone like this is much more in the 20 to 25. But I get this. I get the fact that this is probably the guy you need here.
Yep, I agree there. And it just speaks to this class. It's maybe not as in this range, especially. I think it's a little bit weaker in that kind of 8 to 20 range, even if the depth is maybe a little bit better.
However,
Eric,
if you're Houston, though, I like one of my former, because we don't bet at Sumer, but like my former betting partner, he thinks that Tyree Wilson's live for the Texans at 2, and yet I get him at 12, which seems to me like a steal. We talked about Thomas and I on the Sumer Sports Show. Subscribe to us on YouTube, all that great stuff, wherever you find your podcast. We talked last night about defensive linemen. I thought it was a spirited discussion. Wilson, I don't know if he's that guy that can do kind of like be a Von Miller, be a Derek Thomas, be that kind of player. But I think like I kind of compared him to Justin Tuck, which was a very effective lineman, especially if you build, you get the UCO Manora and the Michael Strahan next to him. That can be the start of something. So I think here you're getting a great value at 12 with Tyree Wilson, the edge from Texas Tech.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, perfect scheme fit as well. They love those pocket pushers with D'Amico coming in. Another comparison I have for him is Marcus Davenport, who Thomas, I'm sure you guys watched a lot of in New Orleans, but hopefully doesn't have the health issues that Davenport's had, but just massive pile driving mentality is definitely there.
I like it.
So I'm up at 13, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I'm picking for Aaron Rodgers Jets here. And man, I would love to get either Skoronski or Paris Johnson if they were to be there. With them gone, I think this does get a little more complicated. Man, this is actually a very difficult decision. I think defensively, I really don't feel like I need to address a whole lot there with the unit they have working on that side of the ball. Brian Branch is tempting. I think they could use another safety if you view him as a safety.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost I would certainly consider trading down. I don't think we need to get into trades necessarily at this point in the draft, but I think if the phones aren't ringing and I got to stay here and make a pick, I think I will go with Darnell Wright
Oh,
out of Tennessee. I really feel like that offensive line is where they need to buy time for Aaron. So we'll plug in Darnell Wright probably at right tackle.
that's a good one. I like
So
it. That's not easy
Elijah
though.
Vera Tucker, Mekhi Becton, Darnell Wright in the last 4 first rounds. Hopefully they can
Yeah.
get that thing figured out up there.
Yeah, it's been a rough go.
Usually it's amazing
All right,
guys like,
Thomas.
Joe Douglas. You think, guys like that understand O-line. That's what he is by trade himself. And I know it feels like
We're
I'm,
just like sending you back through. Sorry to cut you off. We're just sending you back through memory row right now with Atlanta and New England, aren't we?
that's for sure. Yeah, I'm coming back to New England, coming off of the idea of something that I know I'm going to be backing right into Eric Eager's diatribe on this. And maybe not, but I think the idea of New England going after a running back here, because I really love this running back, that I haven't seen a guy that I've been that high on. Of course, Bijan Robinson, and it's funny. I can't believe I'm necessarily saying this. I mean, given some of the people that we've had in the past, and I do believe that the value is there later. I just really like this guy, and I think he gives them some legit consistency. Ramondre Stevenson, I did just put together that offense and get it rolling, right? And who knows what's going to happen with their quarterback situation. I'm a big believer when your quarterback is evolving, and I still think no matter what they're doing, it's evolving. They better have that really stout run game. So that's where my mind is.
Boy, so you were there when they took Lawrence Maroney. You were there when
Yeah.
they signed Corey Dillon. So 1 out of 2. Look, I mean, and you didn't draft a running back high in the first round when you were the Falcons, but you did sign Michael Turner. That was a good move. Look, 14's not bad, right? Like, I mean, what New England needs is high-end talent, not necessarily. They're not a needs team. They're just like they don't have superstars on their football team anymore. And so, Thomas is going for one here, which that's the justification for the pick, right? Is like who on New England is a top 5 player in his own position on the team right now?
Nobody.
I mean, so Bijan Robinson could that's the rub there, right? That's what you could say is like this guy is the poster child for the team now, right? So
Yeah. I know.
I'm a huge Bijan guy. He's by far the highest graded player I've got in this class, so it's kind of hard to argue with that at 14, even if it is at running back.
We talked about tight ends, Thomas and I, last Wednesday on the Sumer Sports Show. I have 2 guys to pick from here with Green Bay because, in my opinion, what they really struggle with, what they really need to do, and you look at the tracking data and this shows up in there, when Green Bay runs play action, no one bites. And some of that is everybody bites because they know that like the play action game was not working over the past few years. And that's because, the tight end, if you remember, forgot the guy's name, got ACL the year before. Mercedes Lewis is not, Mercedes Lewis is playing tight end. Robert Tonyan. And then,
Tonyan.
Yeah, he ACL'd in 21, and then last year he wasn't that great. And then Mercedes Lewis, of course, is like older than I am. So I need a guy.
Josiah DeGuara, 3rd round pick.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's just Josiah DeGuara is a fullback.
Just horrible pick.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with Dalton
exactly.
Kincaid, who right now in the marketplace is the favorite to be, and that has shot up of late. So there must be some news that's giving rise to this. I'm going to go with Utah's Dalton Kincaid. I think Jordan Love would really. I mean, it was one of the reasons I thought Mahomes became who he was is that he had Travis Kelce. Myers also a great prospect, but a little slow. So I'm going to go with the pass catcher here in Dalton Kincaid.
Okay. As the resident Green Bay fan, you have my approval. So good job. Okay. It's been a few years since the Packers GM has received that.
I mean, look, like
TFG approval.
We got to have the Mark Chmura, Keith Jackson, Bubba Franks. Like we got to get this thing back. Jermichael Finley. We got to get this thing back on the road here, don't we?
I know, man. I know. For sure. All right. So I'm up with Washington at 16. And I'm going to go with this dude has been such a guy of mine throughout the process. Deonte Banks, the corner out of Maryland. Love what he does in zone coverage. And they're going to run a lot of that. Rivera's always been, a quarters guy. And you look at the way Banks just communicated in those coverage calls at Maryland. Thing of beauty. Of course, he's a freak athlete. He can go press man as well. And they're going to now have a guy, unlike Fuller and some of those other guys they have, that can, if they want to follow around a number one wide receiver, he can do that as well. So I think this fit couldn't be better. Stays close to home. A+.
Yeah,
I love it.
Washington really built up front, of course, on defense. They need some players to be able to cover on the back end to really make that work, right?
Well, the new owner, by the way, we don't, this is not the place to talk about potential new owner. Did I see $6 billion?
$6 billion,
Yes.
Man.
Wow.
Not
right?
bad
Think
for
about that.
Snyder's initial, $800 million investment.
Did you guys see Mike McDaniel's quote about the price? Did you see that, Thomas?
No.
It was some interview. I don't even know where it was, but Mike McDaniel was there in Washington back in like 2014 or 2013, and he was like, "Franchise is worth that much, and I can't even get a cup of coffee for free."
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I've heard all those stories, right? Yeah. Well, I'll be interested to see how that all plays out. When usually from our perspective as a former GM, but in this world, we always look at it and we think, okay, what is going to happen? New ownership, who they bringing in, not only the coach, management, how are they going to deal with this, right? Denver was really interesting to see how they were going to do it, with the Waltons, right? Because they have really good football people there with George Payton, but you never really know when you get a big guy, especially spending that much money. I often wonder what it would have been if Jeff Bezos had taken that. Where would he have gone with that? Would he have hired Tony Gonzalez as his general manager? I joke only because they're good friends. I'm like, how does it play out? You just never know.
Yeah.
See, now I get this, right? So after the Super Bowl in 2019, I stayed at the hotel where all the Amazon Web Services people stayed, and Tony Gonzalez was in the room next to me. It's now all making sense to me, Thomas, all the connections in this world that he's buddies with Bezos.
Well, you know why? Do you guys know why?
I have no idea why.
No.
Tony Gonzalez was we were at Tony Gonzalez's Hall of Fame, right? When was that?
Yeah, like 2019 or something, 2018.
Yeah. Well, the reality is that you have a guy like Tony's ex-wife is dating, I don't even know if she's married, but dating Bezos. So they were all there together. He was beside me. Matt Ryan was beside me and so was Jeff Bezos. The only time I've ever said a word to Jeff Bezos, he couldn't care, doesn't know. Someone turned to him and said, "That's the guy that picked Matt Ryan." And he looked at me and he said, "God, you really don't know what you're doing." And Matt was right beside him. So they kind of went back and forth. It was kind of a funny deal. But the point is, that's the connection there. So, you weren't that far off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, historically bad pick, Matt Ryan. No success ever came out of that.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Gosh, if I ever interviewed with Jeff Bezos and he bought a team, which I find is an interesting conversation out there, not to get off on a tangent here, Marcus, but the idea that he has so much money that he can literally pay that much more money to someone who has a team that's in a really good spot. I think Mike Florio was talking about that, right? It makes sense. Why do you go after this team who's got all the stuff going on? Why wouldn't you pay $8 million to someone because you have it? I don't know. It would be interesting. The league is in an interesting spot. Yeah. Do you want me to go to 17 now,
Yeah,
Marcus?
you're Pittsburgh.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Pittsburgh. I love the fact that Omar Khan has gotten his opportunity to be the guy there now, by the way. If you ever get a chance to dig into his story, check it out. A lot of people think he was like the money guy. He didn't have a background necessarily in football. Really, really good story. He's got tons of background with a lot of really high-level football people through these years. So when Kevin Colbert decided to move on, I think it was just an ideal situation. Happy for him. So I think they are in a situation they need to continue to build that offensive line. And I don't want to be too much of a homer here. I've been looking at this. I've been back and forth. The Paris Johnson idea, we've already snapped him off, of course. But I like the Broderick Jones idea here. Let's take a Georgia guy and let's build the offensive line here. We didn't take him yet, did we? I want to make sure I didn't lose sight of all of it.
No, I passed him up for Darnell Wright. which I probably should have said, I do have Broderick higher, but I think Darnell's a little bit more ready to go now, which the Jets are obviously trying to win right now. So that was a little bit of a decision there.
I'm a little bit more of an athletic O-line guy. Not that Darnell, I'm not saying you're right. He is ready. He's, what is he, 330-ish? Did we talk the other day?
Yeah.
I can't remember. I think it was. I like where Broderick is, his upside from an athletic standpoint, and I'm excited to see how he evolves. So I think that could be a solid pick for them. Hopefully it's a good pick.
Yeah, I like that. You're going to have to answer some questions about passing up on Joey Porter, though. That's for sure.
Oh, I get it. I know that I should be answering questions. I get
it. But like Porter's a great and like question I have here is, does he fit in Arizona? Because I'm sort of worried. Like you had Vance Joseph there for a long time, but he was more of his own guy. Porter's more of a man guy. Gannon, I'm trying to think of Gannon was. It was funny because Thomas and I were working on this project together back when I was at PFF, where we were doing key performance indicators for teams, and the Eagles defense was like the most vanilla defense ever in 21, and I think that's because they had no talent. And it's weird because Gannon now goes to Arizona. They had no talent. Sorry, Thomas, I should be more responsible with my words, but they didn't have as good a talent as they have now. And he goes to Arizona now. I did get Will Anderson here at 6. The safety, Buda Baker's wonderful as I think he does a lot of things well. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do I go and get a upfield rusher guy like Kalia Cansey, or do I go with Porter, knowing that is this defense really going to take into consideration? Is it really going to make that big of an impact right away? But with things like corner, I think you draft for the future. So I am going to go with the aforementioned Joey Porter Jr. Famously, by the way, his dad his dad won a Super Bowl against the Cardinals in 08.
That was his dad, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
I think about the other linebacker that got the pick 6 in that game, but that was the other linebacker.
Harris.
Yeah, James Harrison.
Right? Yep. Yeah, I think Porter can only get better in zone. I mean, he's obviously been around the game forever. I think he's got the IQ to do that. I was just thinking Anderson and Lucas Van Ness together could be fun to just kind of build an edge duo. I was curious if you were going to go that route, but I think Porter is the best player and position in need there. I actually compared him to James Bradbury, so
there you go.
We still don't have Lucas Van Ness up. Is that right, Marcus?
No.
Gosh.
Yep, he's still there. Which I think is interesting but possible, just given the college production and, a little bit of a projection into the next level. But Tampa's up, and, man, with all these tackles gone, the corners are gone, this is probably the worst-case scenario for them. Although I'm going to take Nolan Smith here. I think you look at that edge group, Shaq Barrett coming off an injury, getting up there in age. You got... What's the Washington kid's name?
Joe Tryon, Shoyinka.
Tryon, yeah, he's been hit or miss, to be nice. I think Nolan can come in and run that system as an off-ball edge, and probably best player up there with best player available there.
I like it. Yep, I like that. I guess I'm up next with Seattle, right at 20, and obviously. When you pick, and we already have them going and with Jalen Carter at 5, it's a good feeling when you can take one on one side of the ball and one on the other, right? So I'm going to come back. I'm going receiver. I just think continue to build there. And you guys are probably going to be thinking do they really want a smaller receiver? I think Zay Flowers is a guy maybe here as an explosive guy that can do some. Look at you. I like him. I was back and forth between him and Addison, of course, but there's something about Zay that I like. We'll see what they can do with him.
Very similar play style to Tyler Lockett. Makes a ton of sense. And step in, play the slot right away, and maybe have a repeat of what they had there for another couple contracts.
I mean, Seattle, to their credit, they had a draft last year similar to what you had in 16, Thomas, and then what the Saints had in 17, where you get 5 starters in one draft. now they can pick like sort of a year ahead of their needs, right? And wide receiver like Lockett and Metcalf, it's not a complete need right now, but you know, if Lockett sours a little bit or something like that, you're a year ahead of any need there, which is super smart in my opinion.
I appreciate you buying me time to. Or are you up?
I'm up. I'm
Eric?
Chargers, you know, and as a Chiefs fan,
shoot.
I just want to
Okay.
give them like the worst player ever. But I you know, like the Chargers I really like the coach and the GM there for sure. And I honestly they've won 19 games the last 2 years, so they're in a pretty good position. You know, I don't think Quentin Johnston's in purview here. They need, if they were going to draft a receiver in this spot, it would have to be somebody like Jalen Hyatt. They need a wide receiver who can really stretch the safeties out, and there isn't really a receiver who's a value right here to do that. So, you know, that's a little bit rich for me. I am actually going to do this, and I know that they put some resources in this position. And I know that, you know, I talk about this all the time with Thomas on the podcast. It's not the greatest gamble as far as, you know, the guy first round picks are concerned, but I'm going to go Michael Mayer, tight end Notre Dame. I just want to give Herbert as many options as I can in the passing game. And at wide receiver, there's really not a fit. At tight end, I think Mayer is a fine pick here.
Yeah, definitely helped the run game too. It's fantastic run blocker there. All right. Baltimore at 22 for me. I think I'm going to have to take Quentin Johnston with him still there. I'm pretty high on Quentin. I get the ball skills. Definitely need to come along. Needs to play up to his size much better. But I don't think he's getting enough credit for how good he is off the line in his releases. He's got both the combination of foot speed and that just explosiveness out of his stance with the size. He's just a really hard guy to get your hands on there. I think his route running is pretty sharp, pretty crisp, even if the route tree was a little more limited. So you put him now next to Odell with Bateman. You got the tight end. You got a very diverse, you know, meshing of receivers there that they just haven't had. And maybe we can get Lamar back here and you know, let this offense go to work.
Eric, you look like you're contemplating.
Oh, me? Yeah. Thomas knows what the looks on my face are composed as. No, I mean, this will be their second wide receiver taken in the first round the last 3 years, which, you know, at some point, you know, the proof has to be in the pudding there. But you get Johnston, Bateman, Odell, Andrews. Now you're starting to cook, I think, a little bit in the passing game. Plus Todd Monken, I think is one that can, you know, when he had Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson and some of those Cameron Brate, some of those tight ends in Tampa Bay, Ryan Fitzpatrick sneaky led the NFL in yards per pass attempt in 2018. So that, you know, there's something there, and they're going to need that to compete in the AFC.
Yeah, especially with Stetson Bennett at quarterback in the fourth round.
Mm-hmm.
This next pick, Marcus, is kind of heresy that I have the Minnesota Vikings because your buddy on the left or right of you, Eric Eager, is, you know, this is one of his main teams, and it's tough. He doesn't want me talking about his team. Look, I'm not.
Well, and I don't know if you guys knew this. I'm Minneapolis based, so.
Are you?
So
I did not.
Yeah,
know.
I'm a Packers fan, but I'm recording this just on the outside edge of North Minneapolis here in my house. So
love that.
Oh, fantastic!
Have a drink at Grumpy's for me when I'm from there.
All right,
so like,
we'll
I love it there. But yeah,
we'll do.
And maybe my buddy, former GM Rick Spielman's not going to want me to be saying this, but I mean, the Kirk Cousins things, it's tough for me, man. It's like, is this the time for them to start looking? Who else is left there? Is this the ideal situation? Not to quote, you know, DJ on this. I mean, I sit there and I think about, is this the Hendon Hooker situation? Can you do this with one of these guys that you don't have a whole bunch? You know, obviously they have a number of different needs, Eric, but it just feels like this is a spot they need to get someone in place for the future. And this might be one of those lucky situations that they don't have to go up too high, that they can be at 23 and take someone like this. So I'm going to go with the quarterback, and I'll probably get beaten up over it. Yeah, I'll probably get beaten up.
Yeah,
Well,
There, yeah, that's
I know they need
that's
D-line
inviting
too.
some pressure.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
It's a tough one.
I would like, just to be honest, like I would push back on that, like just based
Of
on where
course.
I'm at on him. I think coming from that system, it's a pretty big projection. Add the age and the injury on top of it. I don't know if he's ever going to be better than Kirk. So that's just my
Yeah,
perspective on it. But you never know. You never
yeah.
know with
Do
quarterback.
you
He's
need
got
to
a
be
strong
better
arm.
than
So
Kirk though if you make a third of the money? Is kind of, I guess, like the always the rub with the Vikings, right? Like when they
yeah,
lost Bridgewater, it
it's a
was
great point.
catastrophic, not because Teddy was really good, but it was because he was cheap and he played well enough to be a surplus. It's weird with Hooker.
Hmm.
I think the markets are really selling the idea he's going to go in the top round, but I do agree with Thomas that the Vikings need, like, they've been needed. Like, I think Rick Spielman might still have his job if they address quarterback a little differently later in his career, just
Yeah,
because it's just so hard. It's so like, and it's so hard to win with a guy like Cousins. I think is the right way to put it, because I mean Thomas, you had Matt Ryan, who I think is, a decent bit better than Kirk Cousins, but they made similar amounts of money, and at the end there, it's just hard to fit everything under your cap, even when the guy is that good. And Kirk's a step below Matt, and so just trying to make that calculus work has been really hard for the Vikings.
Yeah.
yeah,
Look, I agree with you, Marcus. Like I don't want to argue him too much. I have never picked a quarterback at this spot. And I said the other day, I mean, Matt Ryan was there for 14 years, 1.5 games injured, right? So I was spoiled for my career at the quarterback spot. This is an uneasy spot. This is one of those that you leave, honestly, Marcus. First round, you're walking out the door, the round's over, and you're like, God, did we do the right thing? You have to put it on like
yeah.
you did, right? You're walking proud, but you're like, oh, pray to God, this guy.
And you don't find out for a couple years.
Yeah,
Well, that's part of the
it's
negative of
Yeah,
having Cousins too, by the way, because when Kirk's your quarterback, you're never going to pick lower than like 20th. So you're never. It's even like it's a double-edged sword. At least like with some of these other teams, like the Colts and the Tech, like it bottomed out enough where you got to pick high. The Vikings, because Cousins is good enough, you never pick up high enough to have the QB. And then in the case where they're in now, they were good enough last year where they traded capital for guys like Rager and guys like Hawkinson. This is only one
yeah,
of 5 picks for them too, so it hurts them doubly. So like this is probably Thomas making the best of a bad situation. Um, I have
I would be curious. Just sorry, I just have one more thought. Not to go too far on a off track here, but I would be curious what they thought of like Matt Corral and like Malik Willis from last year. Maybe inquire and see if those might be like later round options
mhm.
to kind of have the same idea. And in my opinion, two quarterbacks that are younger and actually have more like physical upside. Just a thought to throw it out
Yeah,
there,
I
but
do think there's a
go
non-zero
ahead.
chance they trade like they trade a day 2 pick for Trey Lance. Like I'm just gonna throw that out there. I think that is
That's another guy.
Trey Lance, grew up in Marshall, Minnesota, Southwest Minnesota State, in that area.
Let's bring him home. Let's bring him home.
That to me feels reasonable, but
Yeah, I would love that.
Anton Harrison's the pick for me for Jacksonville, the defending AFC South champion. Jacksonville Jaguars just lost Jawan Taylor in free agency to the Chiefs. I know they have Walker Little in place, but Anton Harrison has similar athletic gifts, in my opinion. Younger guy. We talked about him on the Sumer Sports Show the other day. Both of us really like him. I think putting him here, it's a quarterback's best friend here.
Yeah, I never gonna argue going O-line for a young QB like Trevor. Giants are up at 25, and geez, man, with Lucas Van Ness still there, it's like that is incredible value in my opinion. I'm just trying to picture how he would kind of fit in with that defense. Are they still doing the kind of they're still Wink, right? Wink Martindale,
Mm-hmm.
the
yeah.
defense coordinator out
Yeah.
there. Could work. Could work. I like him more, as a wide technique with his hand in the dirt, but I think they could work around it. Aziz Ojulari is there, but he's had a hard time staying healthy. I think Van Ness can line up inside, be a disruptor as well. So I just think the value's too good at this point to pass up on a guy with his upside in Lucas Van Ness.
The best Giants defensive lines have always had multiple pass rushers, right? I mean, that's Thomas. You get to pick for Dan Quinn again.
Well, I do, and it's funny because we were waiting on him, and I thought, I wonder if this is a Dan Quinn guy, Lucas, and obviously, you just did what that happens to me, right? It's happened before. That's an uncomfortable spot too when you're all sitting there around the table, and someone gets snapped off again. You have to make sure that you're putting on this front that you're not moved by it, and all of a sudden, you're picking up the phone and you're talking about trading. You're calling your buddies up and down the line. Is anyone interested? I'm not saying that there's not players there. Look, I know there's all this discussion about Mozzie Smith, I think is his name, right?
Yep.
He's a really interesting guy, of course. I know that our guy here, again, to the left of you, and I'm not just feeding off of Eric Eager, but Eric likes our big guy from the Clemson Tigers in that spot, and he's kind of convinced me into being. Although I'm not a real fan of his lack of athleticism. I'm talking about, how do we pronounce his last name?
Brzee.
Yeah, I think he might be the guy that they might be looking at. It's uncomfortable for me because I know Dan Quinn is all about athletes. I mean, he does not want anyone on his defense that's not going to be flying around, explosive, again, stop-start guy. And that's not necessarily him. But I think they need to continue to fortify. So that's where I'm going. I might take a beating on that.
No, they've really struggled with that interior position. I'm a big believer in Brzee as well, so I would be really excited about that as a Cowboys fan.
Good.
Well, when they had Dontari Poe after his stint in Atlanta, like that, you got Dontari Poe's like last breath, Thomas, and then he went to play for Dan in Dallas. Yeah. And as a Chiefs fan, I was beside myself watching him play there on his last legs. So that's my lasting impression of Dallas's interior defensive line. Was a couple years ago. I'm staying with Clemson here. I'm going to pick a year ahead of my needs for Buffalo. Right, Buffalo, really good roster, probably the best team in the NFL going into last year, and were the best team in the NFL for much of last year. Injuries caught up to them, lack of depth at times caught up to them. I'm going to get out ahead of that problem. I'm going to take Myles Murphy, edge player from Clemson. He can play while Von Miller. He can take some pressure off of Von Miller rushing the passer. Khalil Kancey was also somebody I thought about, but I'm going to go with Murphy just because I think edge is a little bit more important than interior, but not by much anymore. But that's where I'm going to go.
It's a good pick.
I think it makes sense.
Yep. I thought he was. We even project him going earlier. I'm sorry, Marcus. I was surprised he lasted this late. I thought that he'd go.
This is usually where I end up with him is kind of in the 27 to even into the early second. He had a really big down year his junior year, but the traits are definitely there. The depth of the edge class, I think, pushes him down a little bit for a lot of people. But I was just going to say, even with Von Miller, 34 years old, coming off his second ACL, like, you don't even know how much you can count on there. So,
well, we've talked a lot about edge rushers making mistakes on edge rushers. Eric, we talked about it with the D lineman the other day. Marcus, that is something that's always on my mind because we are so driven in the NFL to satisfy our needs, and our needs can override. And I talked to virtually any one of the GMs, and I believe they would do the same thing. When they make the mistakes, it's always on excessive need, and an owner breathing down their neck about their excessive need, quite honestly. So, I just thought that he would go a little bit earlier, but it'll be interesting. You may be right in line. He may be in the back end of the first for sure. So,
All right, so this puts me up for Cincinnati, and I'm gonna go. Some good players still available here. I'm going to go to a guy I mentioned earlier in DeJuan Jones. We're going to keep him close to home in Ohio. The right tackle situation there, they have some bodies right now, but Jonah Williams unhappy with his situation, kind of being asked to move to right. They got, Lyle Collins just has really not been the same for about 2 years. He's had injury issues. I'm a big fan of Paris John of obviously Paris, but Dewan Jones as well. He's just the wingspan is insane. He's so strong, even when his feet aren't perfect and he can be a little bit unbalanced. He can get his hands on guys and slow them down just out of these weird, awkward positions. He just has a superpower at the tackle position. I thought he was really good in the run game as well. They've been going to a lot more gap stuff in Cincinnati, so I think just moving guys with the down blocking, the driving, he's going to be a beast with Orlando Brown on the other side. You got about 700 pounds between the two of them.
Like it.
Now we have the Saints. By the way, your buddy Mickey Loomis, Thomas. There's no chance they pick at 29. No chance, right? they're picking a lot like 15, aren't they?
Yeah, I feel like they will move. I feel like they're jumping. But we're not supposed to be moving, right? So my head is focused on this. If you want me to make that call, but the last thing I need is him to call me and hear that I'm making comments about his draft, right? We were laughing. We did an interview about a year ago and was in front of my van, believe it or not, Marcus. And he starts off the interview and he said, I said, look, you're like the Godfather. You're one of the oldest GMs out there. He said, I disagree with you. That's for old curmudgeons. And I hope that I'm not that. He said, but let me start one thing off here. I do hate the Falcons. And I'm like, gotcha. So even though we're really close, he's always got an edge towards the Falcons and what we do and anything we do there. So, I know my feeling is, let's say that they're going to stay there, Eric, besides the fact that they probably will move up. Derek Carr being there, continue to have the people around Derek. That's going to be important for them. Thinking tight end here, if they stay in this area. I'm a big fan. I like this tight end class. We had, who do we go already? Who do we have go at already at this point?
Mayer and Kincaid so far.
We had Mayer and Kincaid.
Yep.
I'm going to keep with this, and I go back and forth on this because I'm a big Luke Musgrave fan because I think he's a big guy. I think he's got a lot of upside to him, as I am Laporta. But I'm going back to Homer, and this is two Georgia people. And by the way, I used to take a beating because I never drafted Georgia people in the first round. But I'm just sitting here thinking about Darnell Washington and where he is and what he could bring to a team. And there's upside there. Of course, huge guy. The span to make some plays, also be kind of a blocking type guy as well. He's a really interesting guy for me. Late in the first round, I think it might be an ideal spot for him. So let's go with Darnell Washington.
Saints obviously haven't had a difference maker at tight end since Jimmy Graham or the guy that you drafted, right? Benjamin Watson, who had some time in New Orleans. But that one's a good one, right? Benjamin Watson, 825 yards for New Orleans in 2015, probably the last kind of real, guy there. Jared Cook had his moments, but very inconsistent player. So they have.
We don't stand for Taysom Hill slander on this channel.
Is Taysom Hill really a tight end though? Eagles at 30 are the weirdest one here because they have a lot of depthy needs, but they don't have a lot of startery needs. So you can think about wide receiver here because Hurts is going up for a contract. Brown already has a contract. Do they give one to Devontae Smith or do they just want to reset the clock there? So that's an option. Interior lines, you need that there, but it's not a great value at this spot.
I did take Paris already.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So when I look at this one and then safety, look, Brian Branch is probably the best value right here, even though positional importance is tough at 30. But at the back end of the first round, I think I'll do that. I'm going to go with Alabama's safety, Brian Branch. Kind of a perfect replacement for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, frankly.
Seriously, converted corner, safety, probably a better version. So I like that pick a lot. Kansas City, I get to wrap this thing up. Two undersized players that I'm thinking about here between Jordan Addison and Kalijah Kancey.
Ooh.
Tough call. I think Addison could have a lot of success in all the space that they operate with in Kansas City. I think Kancey getting to play next to Chris Jones could be freed up a little bit. So that's tough. You can't really go wrong, but I'm gonna go Cansey. I just keep coming back to him. I get the arm length is a huge concern, and there's risk involved there. But he plays strong. He really does. He doesn't, especially if it's just one-on-one. He's not going to get moved off his spot as much as you would expect at 280 pounds. And he controls his guy when he gets his hands on him. So I really like Cansey. It feels like they've been looking for an impact number 2 for a long time on that pass rush.
Packers
do you approve,
Marquez
Eric?
Valdez-Scantling keeps his starting job for another year then.
There you go.
I love Cansey, by the way. I think he's an ideal spot there. Can't imagine him getting out of the first round. I understand the smallness and everything, but he's pretty damn special in his ability.
And you would have drafted Grady, right?
Yeah.
Who was bigger but short.
Yeah, he's bigger. That's right. But he was such an important part of what we did, and at this part of the draft, I'm much more comfortable. Again, Eric and I were bantering last night about a guy potentially having 35 to 45 or 35, 40% play time. When we're drafting the top 15 in their D lineman, man, they better be playing a lot. At least that's my take on it. So, because I think you can get some really good value guys in the second, third, and fourth.
Mm-hmm. All right, you guys, that was an absolute blast. Just like we said at the intro, you both have a very unique perspective, and I appreciate being so generous with your time and bringing that perspective to the channel. Again, everybody go check out the YouTube channel. Join them for the live stream. I will post those links in the description below, so make sure you go give them a sub. And anything else you guys want to say before we get out of here?
No, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for asking me on here. You guys belong on here. Again, I'm just on the side watching how professionals do this, and that's not a stroke. I enjoy it. You guys know what you're doing on this. I, by the way, forever eschewed the idea of mock drafts in our draft room. So I'm doing this along, just so you know, Marcus, first time I've ever played fantasy football. This year I played, and Eric's heard this story. Guess who my first pick ever was? Harrison
this year?
Alvin Kamara. Oh my God. I took a Saint. That's a tough spot.
Well, and then he of course he finally didn't have a great season. So it was like the one time, all those years he could have taken a season off for you. Instead, he was amazing. Yeah. And then the one year you needed him to be good, he kind of hit the skids a little bit. So it's just how life works.
Seriously, just can't get it right with that. Bummer. Always next year, Thomas. Next year.
Thank you, Marcus.
All right, you guys, take care. Everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you for the next one.